Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here. It's very nice to see those of you in the room. Good morning to everyone who's watching us on streaming. We're glad that you're here for our session. My name is Michael Berman. I work in the CSU Chancellor's Office as the Chief Innovation Officer within the Division of IT. And it's a real pleasure and an honor to be here with you today. We're going to have a chance to talk about a really interesting topic, artificial intelligence, how it's being used in the CSU system and beyond. And I have a very distinguished group of panelists, which I will allow them to introduce themselves in just a minute. I'm just going to give you a little bit of context before we get there. So I think most of us have some intuitive notion of what artificial intelligence is, but I spent long enough in the classroom to feel like I should start with some kind of a definition. And so I used a very simple sort of reductive definition, which is artificial intelligence in general is using machines to do the kind of things that people typically are expected to be able to do. And but there's some real caveats to that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then when we talk about machine learning, that's software that can learn over time. In other words, it can improve its performance over time by collecting information about what it's done, learning what worked, understanding what didn't work, and then improving its performance. And this came out of a great conversation I had with Drew that you'll meet in a minute, but a way to think about modern AI systems really is their prediction systems. That's really what they are. And the way a student success AI system works is not that different from how weather prediction works, with a couple of big caveats. One is that people are not the weather. The weather assumably has no will of its own, yet most of us, I believe people have free will. And but the mathematics and the methodology used in AI is very similar to what's used in weather forecasting. And so the promise is that AI systems can make predictions based on large amounts of data. And we couldn't do this before in higher education because we didn't have so much data about what our students were doing. But now, between the formal data we collect and then the informal, which we'll be talking about the kind of data that actually gets collected once you deploy something on your campus that's collecting information, dialogues from students, you get more information. You can use it to make predictions. And a prediction really says, in this situation, if we do nothing, this outcome is likely, okay? Not certain, but likely. And it also assumes that you don't take any action. So the risk is that if we treat AI predictions as statements of certainty, we can really get in trouble. Because then we're really essentially putting a sentence on a student that says, this student is not going to do well. That's really should be treated as a warning. And the remedy is insisting that human judgment be part of the process. So I think that's really important. And you'll see how that comes into play in the kind of systems we're talking about today, which are these voice response, chatbot type systems, that the human connection is still a very critical part of the process. Some of the ways that people have talked about using AI, there's been some experiments around smart tutors. We're not going to talk about that today. There's machine grading of essays, which, we could have a whole discussion about that and what's good and bad about that. Machine learning is used for predictive analytics. So looking at all the information you have about how your students are doing on campus and trying to, out of that, figure out more information about what's going on so you can take action and understand where problems are. Scheduling assistance, so tools, for example, that help students schedule their courses. But the main one we're going to focus on today is conversational artificial intelligence, which is commonly known as chatbots or natural language personal assistants. Now, I want to acknowledge that there's work going on all over the CSU. These are just 4 campuses that I know that are specifically working in AI chatbots, and I am sure there are others that I just don't know about. In my role as Chief Innovation Officer, a big part of my job is to find out what's going on with technology in the CSU, but as all of you understand, just understanding what's going on one campus is a real challenge. So you can only imagine looking across the 23 campuses. But these are 4 of the campuses where I know that quite a bit of work has gone into developing these conversational bots. And we have 2 of the campuses here today. So at this time, we're going to introduce the panel, and I'll let them introduce themselves, starting with Elizabeth Adams from CSUN.
Great, thanks. As he said, I'm Elizabeth Adams from CSUN. The machine grading of learning thing is funny. I just saw in our police blotter that somebody stole one of our Scantron graders, and I I just was trying to figure out what one would do with a stolen Scantron grader. I hope something useful, but at any rate, just a really quick introduction to CSUN, which I know a lot of you already know about. It's one of the largest campuses in the system. We're typically the second largest campus in the system behind Fullerton. And we are an MSI, an HSI, and a PZ. We're also the only four-year university in the San Fernando Valley, and we're the Valley its own city. It would be the fourth largest city in the state. So it is not a small thing. And we have a large population of traditionally underserved, Pell eligible, first generation students. And we have a major problem with our equity gap. In fact, the chancellor has made it very clear that if we don't fix our equity gap problem, the whole system will fail. So there's no pressure on us at all. But what I want to talk a little bit about very briefly, and we'll talk more about it when we talk about the problem, and I want to acknowledge my colleague Janet O, who's our Senior Director of Institutional Research, who's in the room. When we got the GI 2025 set up from the Chancellor's office, she immediately said, we don't have a graduation problem. We have a retention problem. And she showed us the math. I love it when people show me math. I'm from the humanities, so math is fun. When we look at our students, we lose too many students by year 4 to actually make our graduation goals. And so it doesn't matter how much we focus on the juniors and seniors, we have to figure out how to keep the freshmen. It's also true of transfer students, but it's more true of freshmen. And so remember that, because I'll come back to it when we get to the problem issue.
Good morning. I'm Amir Dabirian. I'm the Vice President and Chief Information Officer for Cal State Fullerton. The largest, we compete with Northridge. So, and Long Beach all the time too. Who's the largest within CSU, but one of the largest universities at CSU. As Tim talked about yesterday, all of us have similar problem at Georgia State. So if you look at our demographic, we're around 40,000 students. We have 43% underrepresented. We have 45% Pal, about 58% first generation. So when we want to work on GI 2025 and try to improve graduation rate, I do agree with my colleague. One of the things we find out is students really have retention issues and also don't know what's going on campus. One of the things that this can bring to us, when we looked at the problem, most of the students didn't know what the services we had. Most didn't know what time they can go there. They didn't know common, easy problems that Tim brought up yesterday in our presentation. So we start looking at how can we use technology to bridge some of the gap at this scale. You're looking at the ratio of advisement with the students, ratio of how we can really touch students 24/7. The only thing we could think of, how can we use their method of looking at technology, because they're tethered to these devices more than anything else in their lives. And on average, everyone picks up their phone about 150 times a day. Okay, and it spends about 178 minutes on average on a phone. Now I spend about 400 minutes, on average, but most people does that. So how do we use these devices and use artificial intelligence? And Mike talked about to the good use of really bridging our gap with our students. Thank you.
Are we standing? Oh, I'll stand up. I'm shorter than these guys. I'm Drew. I'm the CEO of AdmitHub. We build conversational AI for college success. You heard Tim Rennick yesterday talk a little bit about us. They were our first partner. And I'll get a little bit into the RCT we ran with them, but he really covered most of it. PS, brief aside, if any of you ever starts a company, an RCT on your very first partnership is a recipe for sleepless nights and gray hair. Nonetheless, I spent my entire career in education and technology, mostly higher ed. And I noticed through most of my work, I did a lot of one-on-one tutoring and supporting students through classes. And I noticed it was easiest to reach them through the place where they spend most of their time, the public library. No, that's a joke. Their phones. And I was texting them almost 24 hours a day. And as a technologist, I always thought, no, there's got to be a better way to automate this. And it was only when I connected with my co-founder, Kirk, and suggested, well, what if we could help kids text their way to and through college? And before I could say that was the stupidest idea that's ever come out of my mouth, he was jumping up and down, imploring me to build it. And 6 months later, we launched, and it was more successful than we could have ever imagined. And I'll tell you a bit more about the details later. But really, when I think about it, I don't think of us as a texting platform or mobile messaging or even a chat bot. I think about the idea of building a conversational strategy to help students change their behavior. And really what we're not inventing anything. Actually, we're just combining the best practices and interesting technologies from other places in a way that I don't think others have. And I'm glad to share more in a bit. I'm up next, right?
You're gonna be up next.
All right, and a bit has happened.
We're gonna ask each of the panelists now to talk about what was the problem they were trying to solve and what solution did they come up with. So here we go.
Yeah, so Tim talked a little bit about the summer melt problem, and that was the first problem, that was put on our plate. But quite frankly, that wasn't the problem we were actually solving. What we were solving is a problem of attention. Grabbing someone's attention in the smallest possible way and persuading them to do the thing that they need to do to succeed. And we do this in a few ways. One, we give answers to their questions 24/7. That's the AI component, and it's sexy and cool, but quite frankly, that's not the thing that usually changes student behavior. That's the thing that allows us to scale wildly. The stuff that does change student behavior.
Andrew, I'm sorry. I got a text from one of your Zoom users, and they said the volume is a little low, so they can't hear it, the presenter. So I just want to
Turn it up to 11.
I just want to thank you.
No problem.
Using text platforms.
That's
live
good. Look at
right
that.
now from one of the-
The interventions work. So the thing that actually changes behavior are the guided conversations that we design to help students through everything from the FAFSA to filing a parking permit or finding, the admissions office. And then the third, and actually perhaps as important as the others, is infusing fun, engaging, and somewhat frivolous things into the conversation. A well-placed emoji or animated GIF goes a long way. And the theory behind this and the theory of change that we have is that, there's a lot of transactional things students must do on the path to and through college. But we also take the opportunity to reach them, and, you're going to get 99% open rates and oftentimes 50% plus response rates on the campaigns we send. Reach them and help them feel more a sense of belonging on campus, greater connection to their cohort, and a feeling of just goodwill from the university that, not only are they listening to what I'm saying, but they're, making this pleasant for me, because there's a lot of stress that goes into things like the FAFSA or registering for classes for the first time. And if you can guide these conversations in an incredibly personalized way, so that when someone goes off the track, they get flagged in your information system as, flagged for verification or needing some sort of hold. It's good to intervene, but it's also as important to intervene when they do the things right. Oh, you just completed your FAFSA? Here's an animated GIF of Tina Fey making it rain money that should make you smile and feel good about yourself. So much we focus on, the things students must do to succeed, but forget to celebrate the moments where they have done the good work. And doing so just makes them that much more likely to respond and pay attention the next time you reach out. So some of our results, Tim talked amply about their summer melt problem. He didn't mention that actually the next 2 years we also set records subsequently, and overall, and after working with their admissions office for 3 years, dropped their melt by around 55% from where it was originally. Other interesting problems: Winston-Salem State University, a large HBCU in North Carolina, had a problem with just a huge influx of phone calls, usually in the month of August. In fact, The year before we started working, they got 16,000 phone calls in that month. And they said, we have to solve this problem. This is too much for us. People are waiting for 5 hours on hold. And so oddly enough, this is the testament to the proactive piece. We got ahead of the game and said, hey, we know you're going to be asked questions about housing or your financial aid package or X, Y, and Z. Ask me first. And by doing so in a proactive way and prompting the questions, we dropped those phone calls down to about 10,000. So about a 36% reduction in phone calls overall for the season, which was really nice, and particularly during the peak time. And then on the retention piece, obviously Elizabeth and us will be working this year with CSUNY, guiding students hopefully to a productive graduation at Cal State Northridge. But we have had some early success in this area. West Texas A&M, which is a rural school in Texas, in Canyon, Texas. I recommend going, it's beautiful, very large canyon. We ended up, doing similar things around sense of belonging and nudging them to complete important tasks and feeling connected to the campus. We improved their retention about 2 percentage points. So the takeaway is that if you desire a particular goal, the key is to design a conversational strategy around achieving that goal with some of the things I mentioned. And if you ever wanted to work with us, we'd be glad to help. Or if you don't want to work with us, we'd still be glad to help because quite frankly, it's good for everyone. Actually, my colleague Brian is here somewhere. We have a bunch of books that my co-founder wrote about engaging Gen Z over conversation. So lessons to be learned and taken away, whether you use our AI or something else. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Okay, so I already sort of previewed this for you. I don't know how many of you were involved in setting the actual numbers for your campuses, but I remember in the summer of 16, they said, okay, put down what you think you can do. And we sat in a room and sort of said, okay, we're gonna really, really stretch, right? And then when we got our actual goals back, we were like, oh no, we didn't even come close to stretching, right? So these are our goals and where we are right now. So we are to get to 66% for 6-year for our freshmen, 30% for our 4-year for our freshmen, and our current rates are 54% and 14.5%. So those are just, we're not there. And I have to acknowledge, I'm sure a lot of you have seen the little gauge things that shows how your campus is doing. Our 4-year gauge is very red. And we have the equity gap problem. And I mentioned the retention issue, right? We had really focused, because we knew this, on our first-time freshmen. What could we do to keep them? So we did all kinds of things, right? We did, my favorite, and we're just looking at the data now, is that we literally circulated a list of all of our high DFU rates to all our deans. So here are all the courses that freshmen are likely to fail. And we just gave them the list. The DFU rates went down last year. Literally, we didn't do anything but show them the courses where it was a problem. So there are definitely things that you can do. And then I heard a podcast. Actually, I didn't hear a podcast. One of my colleagues heard a podcast. And I don't know how many of you have heard this, but it's called Hidden Brain. It's an NPR podcast. And they featured the Georgia State thing, right? And they actually specifically talked about the student that Tim Rennick highlighted at the end of his presentation, who had not wanted to ask the question. And for those of you who have studied this kind of thing, and I have, I'm a cultural anthropologist, that story was the story for me. That's it. That's the problem right there. Students don't know what to ask, and they don't know who to ask. And they're embarrassed, right? Because they don't know that they think they're supposed to know. How could they know? The stuff that we have them do is amazing, right? You have a rubella hold. What does that mean, right? So we have all kinds of stuff that we do with students that's confusing. So I reached out to AdmitHub. It turned out that the folks who were doing the research on their Georgia State project one of them had been in graduate school with our director of faculty development, UC Santa Barbara. She called him up. All of a sudden, we're having this conversation. And we decided to launch CSUNY. We did think about different names, but we went with CSUNY. That's his logo. And we launched him with our new freshmen this year. We, like a lot of CSU campuses, did not care one tiny little bit about summer melt. In fact, we're over enrolled, and so we want summer melt. We did check. I do want to say that one of the things that Georgia State found was that their summer melt was disproportionately affecting first generation and students of color.
Right.
And we did check to make sure that our summer melt wasn't doing that, and it wasn't. So the melt population was the same as the yield population. We're like, okay, if they need to melt away, they can melt away. So we really started with the kind of stuff you communicate with freshmen about. Early start, FAFSA, right? But then we also did some of what Drew was talking about, which is to just have these interactions with them. The response rate has been fantastic. Only 6% of our students who we put in the pilot opted out of talking to CSUNY. And we get the best returns, and I'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about the early lessons. We get the best returns to the silly questions. And that's okay, because it means that they're engaging with the campus, right? And the biggest return we got, at least in the summer, was on CSUN trivia. I mean, who would think that anyone would care about CSUN trivia? But they were excited to come to CSUN, and they wanted to know more about the campus. And so giving them a little trivia about the campus was something that they were engaged in. So at any rate, I will stop talking and let Amir talk, and then I'll come back.
Okay, Amir, tell us about iTuffy.
To goal, can you move it to the next slide?
Yes.
And we come back? You get, again, in 2017, the start of 2017, I went to an IBM Watson, one of those conferences, and I looked at some of the stats. Some of the stats said that by 2020, 30% of all searches would be voice-based. So even though we wanted to get into a chatbot, we want to be able to really bring the voice also into the pictures by coming up with Alexa and Google and all of those new coming in. We wanted to be able to bring a platform, not just, just a regular chatbot, but something beyond for the students. And then using the artificial intelligence technology and machine learning, just Michael talked about, because we wanted to be able to get these conversations. Right now, we have all these advising conversations, but we have no record of them except 1 or 2 notes that we get from the students. We don't know what a student are asking and how we can mature the process. By getting these conversations, we're actually getting real data. Students, the way they phrase the question is completely different, the way we think they're phrasing the question. And we're learning from them every day how they actually want to be able to get the data from us, learn from the things, and change their journey throughout the process. So the data, to get this smartest, to get the computer to get smart every day was really important to us. How do we really leverage the machine learning? So our goals was similar to most of the people goals, GI2025. We want to be able to get the students what they need and give them a better experience. When we look at the campus, there were 3 things that was really important. One, it was social. What, where, when. They wanted to know, people, Titan Pride, where are the events on campus? Where can we find something? Where can I find food? You think it's easy, but it's not. When are they open? Who do I call? Where is the campus directory, right? I want to get academy advising. Where is academy advising? You think they know? No, they don't. And easy as having a Siri on their fingertip that they can ask this question while driving, while be able to, running around the campus, have a geo capability so they have a map, they can go someplace. Click here to go to the map, click here to get contact, click here to call. That was really important to us. So we wanted to, and the other things was academic. So it was social, academic, financial. Those are the three things we lacked. So we looked at academic advising and we looked at how can we get triage question. We know that there's still, it has to be some human touch to be able to really get them to the next steps. But how can we triage them? How can we answer 90% of their easy questions 24/7? That was really where we wanted to go. And also we want to have a companion for them, okay? And we wanted to meet them at what they want to do. So our goal, I'm going to talk about architecture. If you could move to the next slide, to the previous slide actually. So it's 24/7, flexible conversations, right? You can type or you can use voice, both, okay? And it also, first day, 1,500 conversation on the first day of class. 1,500 conversation, 4,500 conversations in the first week. And we haven't even marketed this into the, we're gonna do a full blast marketing this year. So student finds them, a student use it. That's another thing. If you go to the architecture, it was important for us that we build something that really can be intentional. Can you go next, Mr. Herman? Okay, so we wanted to be intentional. So one of the things we did is we have it available on iPhone, okay, iOS, have it on Android, have it on our portal. They can actually type conversation right off the portal. We're actually gonna add text to this. Amazon Alexa. We are deploying Amazon Alexa in all of our dorm rooms. This is going to every single social area of our dorm rooms. So this can be, and we have created an iTuffy app directly on here, which is combined with everything else. We didn't want to redesign it for every device. So that's going to be available across the board. On the bottom, we set up two things. We use an IBM Watson services, so you can use text-to-speech, speech-to-text concepts. We are doing conversation and artificial intelligence and machine learning in here. And then we wanted to be able to have a layer that goes and get the information of our students. So we can, for example, I can say, what is my GPA? Do I have a hole? Any of those things, we can be intentional getting the data from the systems of the records and everything else. So we have connections now to PeopleSoft, UAchieve, and other sources directly into the system. So as we add more services to this architecture, we don't need to create a new system or we need to create a new chatbot those are all can be the top. And any kind of a new services comes out, we can add to the bottom. The middle piece stays the same. So we develop a middle piece, which is kind of different than most things, to be able to really be flexible and deployable every day to any kind of a platform. So, the other thing is, can I show my demo?
You can try it. You get one shot.
I'm going to try my demo.
One shot.
I'm going to give it a shot. The Alexa piece is still in beta. It's going on next month to all the dorms. So we will, always is to allow demo. It's kind of our platform called iTuffy because Tuffy is our mascot. Okay. Alexa, start iTuffy.
Hi, I am iTuffy, your campus buddy. Did you know Titans reach higher by completing their FAFSA? The 2019 to 2020 FAFSA is available now at fafsa.gov and California DREAM Act application is available now at dream.csac.ca.gov.
Exit. Alexa, ask iTuffy, who is the mascot?
The CSUF mascot is a very good-looking, intelligent, yet humble elephant named Tuffy the Titan.
Alexa, ask iTuffy, where can I find money?
There are a variety of scholarships available to CSUF students, ranging from $500 to $10,000, with over $2 million paid annually. For specific scholarships, please visit the financial aid website.
Alexa, what is GI2025? Oh, sorry. I stopped.
Let
me do it.
We got to move on. We're running out of time.
I'm sorry, but I haven't learned about that yet. Here's what I found searching the XIF website.
So we create one for GI2025. Let me ask that one. Alexa, ask iTuffy, what is GI2025?
Sorry, I'm not sure.
Okay, all right, I'll skip it. But you could again, Alexa is one of the mode of this. The other thing is on this, on a secure questions, some of you guys are gonna ask the question because of the FERPA. We do not say it on a voice. So you can only see those directly on your phone. So that's really a key, because if your GPA or campus-wide ID or any of those things only available. So I'm gonna.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm gonna let Amir start off again. We're talking about what we learned from the process that we went through, and we'll have each of the panelists have a chance to respond to this.
So what we learned is we really need to work very close to your campus stakeholders, okay? And keep talking to them and keep looking at what are the conversation pieces that we cannot answer. One of the things we do, if we cannot answer the question, or iTuffy cannot answer the question, we actually do a web search for them. So this does an automatic web search. And we keep track of that. And we look at it to see how come we couldn't answer it, what kind of machine learning did not do that, we need to intervene, and then work with the constituencies to do that. We want to make sure that all the responses are accurate and uses and monitor machine learning. So we keep track of machine learning in here. We also monitor the infrastructure for expansion. So we want to make sure that as the number of conversation goes up, we'll be able to handle the systems effectively. Future work, we're looking at getting more personalized content to be more intentional. When we're looking at graduation 2025, we want to be able to take every student and look at their program and see how we can help them individually. How can we work with IR and other institutional areas on the campus to be able to enhance that? Of course, we're deploying Amazon Alexa to the dorms. We're also gonna put it in the libraries and other places. So now people can go to them and ask those questions. We are working with the financial aid and the student support services to triage there this semester coming up. So we can actually be able to help them to fill in FAFSA, which is really complicated. I know that because I've been trying to help people. Graduate advising. And the last thing that is on our docket to do this, we have EAB, a scheduling service. Some of you guys have the EAB program that does scheduling. So what we're gonna do at the end of this, if we can't solve the problem, we're gonna be able to schedule an advising session for them automatically from the chatbot. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Amir. Let's go to Drew next. What have you learned through what you've been doing in the process you've gone through?
Do you have the slide? Because it's very important.
Okay.
So a year after launching at Georgia State, we talked to Scott Burke, played here by Robert Downey Jr. And he told us that they would have needed to hire 15 additional staff members to do the volume of communication that Pounce managed on their behalf, which, well, quite clearly, one, wasn't in the budget, or two, in reality. And not only that, there was a fundamental change in how they operated, which was a relief to many of the staff members who were so used to having to handle those process and status questions all day over email, that they were suddenly freed up to focus their attention on those students who most needed it. The kids like Austin, who he brought up, who, you know, quite frankly, they can ask a question over text message, we might be able to answer, but quite usually the real challenging stuff requires a human interaction. And so we learned a few things. We learned one, again, the conversational strategy key piece is having a goal in mind and driving relentlessly toward that goal. But that what we built wasn't a platform necessarily for broadcasting information to students, it was a platform for listening at scale and surfacing those, the students who say, I'm dropping out, or, you know, my parent died and I'm not sure I can afford college, can you please help me? Those are the moments that, you know, we find, identify, and escalate. We also learned the value of creating trust first. When you get a strange text message from a robot claiming to be the mascot of the university to which you were admitted, you can imagine there will be some skepticism, doubt, and confusion. And so the key is, like, we're in blind date territory here. We have to build trust first. And Elizabeth alluded to this. Oddly, the best way to do it is with the silly, banal, and sometimes seemingly irrelevant. Brief aside, my father and uncle hosted a radio show for 37 years about giving people car advice. And folks would call in and explain their problem with their car, even embarrass themselves making loud noises. And usually because they didn't know the answer, they would ask them, the first question they would ask is, you know, what color is your car? And most people will laugh at this like ridiculous question because how could that have anything to do with the engine? But what it did was it really opened up people to being relaxed, divulging the truth, and being at ease in the conversation. And to some degree, we embody that a great deal with all of our communication. Again, also the goal, and this is important, is not to mimic a human. Is actually to deliberately be a robot, quite frankly. And by doing that, as Elizabeth also alluded to this and Tim mentioned it, you change the expectations when, you know, sometimes it'll make mistakes. Like, you know, even Alexa doesn't know all the time what you're asking.
I have a senior advisor who's off the floor. Yes. Most of them.
So, and then the second thing is it will allow.
So all of those zip to graduation.
Oh, someone turned on the Zoom microphone. Oh, yeah.
Unmute themselves.
Or to mute themselves. And then the third thing is there's no silver bullet, quite frankly.
Total of
It's
120.
simply behavior change and success with pretty much all things, but especially a platform where you're sending your messages in 160 character chunks, comes from a relentless pursuit and an accumulation of many small interventions that lead to something enormous at the end. And then the final piece, and Elizabeth, maybe you can speak a little to this too, is don't wait to launch, because only by launching, I'm sure iTuffy, you've learned this for that program as well, do you actually learn, like you can try to anticipate the questions students will ask all day and you'll be wrong. Because they will never ask it the way you expect them to. They don't say, how do I file the FAFSA? They say, I have no money. And also the things that are important to them, you'd be shocked how important the presence of a Chipotle on campus is. And I was very proud to see one over there. But we get that question a lot and it blows my mind. But we also get plenty of questions like, what is the FAFSA? Or, you know, I'm dropping out. You know, and these are the things that, you know, open my eyes when I look at the trends in our topics that really show me the value of what we're doing every single day. And I guess I'll probably stop there because we have an open discussion later, but I'll let you take the next swag, Elizabeth.
Elizabeth?
So let me just talk about, we launched this summer, so these are very early lessons, but I do want to highlight something Drew was just talking about, which is you don't know what they want to know, right? When we were working on, you're gonna, if you do something like this, you have to work on a knowledge base, right? You have to have all the answers. And so all summer I was like, okay, do we have everything in the knowledge base? Do we know what they want? No, we don't know what they want to know. And it's okay. I actually demo this a lot. And so, you know, I'll ask it questions like, where's pizza? Or, you know, can I bring my goldfish to campus kind of thing. And that gets it to create new knowledge bases, right? I actually yesterday asked it about the rubella hold. It doesn't know. So now we're going to program what the rubella hold is about. They do like texting. I mean, Amir's talking about the voice thing, and I think that's really important, but let me talk just for a second about texting. I was just in a meeting with our AS leadership and our campus leadership a few weeks ago. And as some of you may know, we're having a few issues going on at CSUN. We were talking to them about how we had communicated about those controversies. And somebody said, well, did you read the FAQ? The student said, no. We sent you an email about it. Yeah. There's a letter on the front page of the website. And then finally one of them says, we don't read email. And there was this pause and we kept talking. And about 20 minutes later, she raised her hand and she said, I want to be clear about something. We know how to read email. That's good. We just don't read it. And I said, I hadn't spoken at that point until that point. And I said, yeah, we actually knew that you knew how to read email. But they walk around like this all day.
So do
Right. Yes, exactly. Actually, I was at Parent Day earlier this week, and I talked about them doing this, and I said, you know, everybody should look up every once in a while, and I paused and I got applause, but you know, it's a beautiful world out there. But they like texting. They don't mind it. They like it, right? It doesn't seem intrusive. If they don't want to engage, they don't have to engage. But they spend all day texting. I spend all day texting. I like texting. It's a really easy way to communicate. People don't like picking up the phone anymore. People don't like looking on websites. And I was thinking about this yesterday when Ryan was talking, because what he was saying is we have a tendency to build systems that we think are good, right? So we have this whole thing at CSUN where we talk about email is the official communication of CSUN. It's true. It is the official communication of CSUN. So what? If they're not reading it, it doesn't matter that it's official, right? We have to stop building stuff that we like. We need to start building stuff that they will hear, because otherwise you are just creating systems that reinforce the system. You do need a writer, and let me go back to one piece that Drew said that I like. You've got to have the right voice. CSUNY has a voice, Pounce has a voice. They all have sort of the same voice. It's a little cheeky, it's a little robot-y. I hired somebody, we had an open position in Missions and Records that was working on website stuff. And I hired somebody who was a writer. And I said, you got to figure out what the voice of CSUNY is. And she has. And so when she answers questions, if it's a question that we actually want CSUNY to answer, she answers like CSUNY. And if she wants it to be a human, then she'll actually contact them. You also can adapt this stuff. That's what I love about the machine learning piece. As I said, we didn't care about summer melt at all. We want summer melt. We'd like more melting, right? But we care a lot about retention. And so we really need to adapt what we're doing to retention. And in fact, one of the things I was talking to Drew about yesterday is what are we going to do with this for our sophomores, right? We have a tendency to communicate a lot with students when they start and a lot with students when they're ready to graduate. And there's nothing in between. And that's a long time and a lot of classes and a lot of experience on our campus. And so we really need to figure out how to engage with them as we keep going. So we've made a commitment to track the fall 18 entering class through 6 years. And we're working with AdmitHub, the University of Pittsburgh, and UC Santa Barbara on a research project to also bring in the fall 19 class. A lot of, and this is a tip, you know, fellow CSU folks, there are a lot of grant agencies that are interested in this. Kresge is interested, that's who we're working on, Irvine's interested. So if you're interested in doing something like this, come find me and I'll talk to you a little bit about what we're doing, because we would love more campus partners. Irvine especially wants to do this at scale. And so I think it's important for us to think about how we can harness the power of the system to get this out there to tens of thousands of students rather than, or maybe even hundreds of thousands of students rather than just on a single campus. All right, I'll stop talking.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
All right. So I think at this point we've got plenty more to talk about. As you can see, I've got a very smart and thoughtful panel here. But let me just see if there are any questions in the audience. And if there are, Amir, can you put the mic over there on the stand? And if there aren't any, we can continue. But I want to offer that opportunity if anyone would like to ask a question. Don't all rush the mic at once. Here we go. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Hollis Robbins, and I'm Dean of Arts and Humanities at Sonoma State. Enjoyed the presentation, enjoyed the one yesterday too, and the story, as you said, the story being the story of that young man who was too embarrassed to talk about his questions, and so went to a chat bot. And the irony that we all know his story, right? And so this question of how we toggle between questions of using technology for a certain kind of anonymity, right? For a certain kind of safety, for a certain kind of engagement that allows a kind of honesty. And then what do we do with that data on the other end? And, you know, is there, and I was thinking about this, I don't know if you were all at the panel or the TED Talks, the grad talks yesterday afternoon, which very much involved individuals telling their own personal stories and their own personal lives, right? So it seems like we have a couple of conversations going on around technology where we have questions of anonymity, privacy, statistics, you know, the not talking about people versus the only way we can tell the story is to talk about ourselves and talk about people. I don't know if I have a question, but I think this question of individuality, privacy, and technology should at least be on the table.
Really important issue.
It is a really important issue. I think one of the pieces that I found really interesting in this conversation, and it's obviously a conversation that we've had, and you know, I think they mentioned the Sac State thing where they're tracking all their cell phones all over campus. These students actually don't expect anonymity, and they actually don't really care whether they have it. What they don't want is to feel foolish, right? And so the student at Georgia State was embarrassed that he didn't know. But the minute he found out, I mean, they contacted him because he had sent 50 text messages. And so he said, oh, sure. He was on the podcast. You know, obviously he knows that but it's, you have to balance it. And the other piece is, and I think what iTuffy's doing is really important in this sense, they like feeling like we know them, right? And so when you do the targeted campaigns, which we do, we pull out certain populations of students. They like knowing that we're thinking about them, especially on a campus as big as ours. So I think we have to balance it, but we also need to talk to them about it, because if they don't mind that we're being intrusive, then I think it's okay to be intrusive. I mean, we need to have ethics around it, obviously, but you know, it's an important conversation, but I don't think it's one where we have to get stuck.
For iTuffy, one of the things we did was we have anonymous and non-anonymous. So for what, when, where, all of those things, there's a lot of things we can triage on campus without really knowing them. So those things we don't need to log in. You know, we can do it without going through actually putting your user ID there. When we get to the user ID, then we can be more intentional about you. So if you really need to know about your records, you know, you do that right now. Basically, we're not doing anything that you don't do now, because except the conversation piece, right? So if you go to an advisor or you log into your PeopleSoft systems and then you look at your records, you can do that. You can look at your holds. All of those are available. So what we're doing is we're actually making it easier for you based on those things for you. So that's how we're trying to balance it between, you still have an avenue that if you want to be anonymous, we can get you so far from then. And that I think is going to be really helpful overall, because there's a lot of shy people still around that don't want to go to a counter and ask those general questions, right? So this will allow that platform. It's like Snapchat. It goes away in 24 hours, right? You put it in, it's not, but there are things that we're finding out, which what we're looking at, how do we deal with sentiment analysis? So, you know, another piece of this is look at, on a future work, is look at sentiment. So what are the students are saying? So if you have the students, lots of the students, they're angry students because you move their admission date from A to B, or you move their, you know, registration from A to B. If those data get to you and we give it to admission office and say, guys, you know, students are not, sentiment is really not, you know, result is not good, we can give that to you. But it could be anonymous. It doesn't have to be perfect. So that's what we balance. I hope that answers your question.
I might just add, can I add one more thing?
Yeah, sure. And then we have another question.
We like, our philosophy is that we like to make it easier for students to get help than to avoid getting help. And that means finding the admissions office or knowing a deadline, but quite frankly, there's other things that arise because that are very sensitive. And they have arisen. I'm sure they'll arise with us. They haven't yet. But you know, there's reasons to escalate things. One reason can be because the bot doesn't know an answer, because CSUNY is stumped, or if CSUNY does understand what you asked and it is very important. And those important things can be anything from I'm dropping out to matters of violence, sexual assaults, depression, suicide, suicidal thoughts. And for that, we're actually just mandatory reporters. So we escalate either to whomever you've identified, the police, whoever the pertinent staff member is. And again, it's a matter of just, it's a listening platform more than a speaking one to a degree. And I would just say, whatever platform you implement, just be aware that someone will ask something very sensitive at some point, and just know that you have its infrastructure in place. Like if they whispered this to a counselor or type it into their smartphone, that someone's able to deal with it, because the worst thing that can happen is nothing. Yeah. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. I'm Sue Moyno, Chair of Academic Senate from Cal State San Marcos. Yesterday, we heard from Tim that they put in $3 million and about 60 advisors to launch what they're doing at Georgia State. I'm just wondering if you can let us know how this changed financially, like what we're going to be able to do in the CSU from a financial standpoint. I think for our campus, $3 million and 60 advisors is just not feasible. So I'm curious if you can speak to how you scaled this and if you're able to give us some figures on that.
So one brief aside, that was for the EAB intervention that they did. At Georgia State has like 10 research studies going on at any given time. That wasn't related to us. On the admissions side, we required them to add no staff members. And now that we're doing retention still, I don't think it's an addition of any for you either.
We repurposed part of a staff member who was already doing the kinds of things that, so it was, it's between, you have to pay startup costs, and then you have to pay per student for the AdmitHub product. It is not expensive, and relative to EAB, for example, it's a fraction of what we're paying for EAB, and we're getting a much better return out of it. I don't want to speak for Drew and his folks in terms of actual cost. Brian is sitting in the back and he can tell you exactly how much it costs, but it really isn't an unreasonable amount of money. And like I said, we're getting a lot of interest from grant funders to help fund startup costs on it. We're hoping that we're going to get grant funding so we can include our transfer students. But there are ways in which I think it's really smart money. And we did not hire, other than repurposing one person in admissions and records, we didn't hire anybody. And here's a plug for AdmitHub. They make it so easy to launch this product. It does not require a lot of time from IT. It does not require a lot of infrastructure on campus. It's just, and that's one of the reasons I like it. It's just text, right? I mean, Amir's got all these, really cool stuff. CSUNY is simple. And I like that it's simple because it doesn't require us to have to maintain all kinds of other stuff.
I can answer this from the Fullerton perspective. The initial cost, first of all, we went to IBM, first year when I was there in 2017, they said it cost $1 million. And I smiled, I said, we don't do this for $1 million. We do it a lot less. So it costs us around under $50,000 for a first year to get the infrastructure and everything going. And it was, then it's ongoing costs of artificial intelligence calls that we do to Watson. So it's really a maintenance cost. And it's very much fractional. So maybe about, maximum, if you got really high usage, get about $10,000, $20,000 a year maximum as far as those goes. So it's not a huge up ramp. Our we're using our own staff. We didn't add initial staff to this from the perspective of this. We always, we add project without adding staff. That's what we do in CSU. So we just do more. That's how we do. And so we did that. We did more with what we need to do. But the goal of this, the piece of this that I think my colleagues just talked about, it requires functional areas to really help us build the conversation piece. I cannot, answer those questions. Neither, Andrew, you really need subject matter experts that kind of help us to build those things. I think that's an area that we need to invest of their time in order to make this better. There's a
So I think
machine learning piece.
We have one last question we can try to sneak in before we run out of time. Well, somebody was waiting.
Running.
We'll do two.
We can do
Sorry, we'll
two.
do two. 5 minutes. We've got 5 minutes. We can do 2 or 3.
Hi, my name is Kristen Tenner. I'm from Cal Maritime. And this question might actually be more for Drew, but would love insights. We are seeing more of our parents being the ones that call in the summer and have the questions. So my question is actually twofold. One, do you think or have any data that having something like the chatbot has empowered students to ask more questions? And secondly, is there an option for parents to use the chatbot, especially in the times coming previous to the start of the school year?
Great question.
So yes and yes. We prefer to talk to students. We think it's better to go right to the source. They're the ones that have to do the stuff. We have a lot of parents, obviously, that end up texting with it either by accident or on purpose, because the phone number that was entered in is the parent's cell phone, not the student. We usually try to do a switcheroo, but I mean, it can accommodate anyone. The only wrinkle is we actually are pretty strict about it once a student enrolls because of FERPA considerations.
Mm-hmm.
But pre-enrollment, actually, it's a lot of parents. A funny story, once we were at University of Wyoming, which is a partner, one of our partner success people was there visiting, and they overheard a conversation in the parking lot. A mom saying to the daughter, well, I'm just going to ask Cowboy Joe. Cowboy Joe's their mascot. And the girl said something to her mother to the effect of, Mom, Cowboy Joe's my friend, not yours. And we were like, we considered it a win. And so, yes, a little bit of both, I guess, is the answer. Yeah, thank you.
So I think we have time for one more question.
I'm Jeannie Stronick from San Diego State, and I was just curious in terms of building that knowledge base. You touched on the functional areas coordinating, but how much time and effort and organizational changes needed to happen to build that knowledge base?
A lot of it's already on your website. And was one of the reasons that I actually really liked partnering with AdmitHub. They pulled a lot of the information off of the website. And then we then started tweaking it, and you go into beta and you ask it questions, and if you don't like the answers, then you mess with it. And we have a web-based chat that's called Ask Maddie, which is why ours is called CSunny. We wanted to distinguish between the two. But I'm really not trying to sell you AdmitHub, but I've never had a vendor that has made a tech project work this easily. I've got this one staff member who's doing some work on it, but otherwise they do all the work. I was telling Drew last night, when I demo it, a lot of times I get answers back, and I finally told my staff member, I said, look, if I'm demoing it and asking stupid questions, you don't actually have to answer. And she said, oh, I wasn't answering, AdmitHub was answering. And so there's, that part of what you're getting from them is that process. So it doesn't require a lot. And in fact, as I said at the beginning, I was really tense and really worried that we didn't have enough in there. And they said, just don't worry about it. And by the way, in the first month, I think we had 115,000 text messages back and forth with CSunny. And that's with 2,600 of our freshmen. So if you want to get a sense of the scale of this, and that's just the first month, and just with 2,600 out of 40,000 students. So
great. Well, let's wrap it up there. Thank our esteemed panelists.
Thank you.
I've put together some resources online for your reference about AI and other aspects. I'm going to add to it. I've got a bunch more things I need to add to it, so I'd recommend take down the URL. Don't go there yet. Wait a couple of days because I'm going to add some more things. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for all the work that you do on behalf of our students.